But first, we've talked a lot about drought in recent months, and so we should. And while drought and water shortages are often terms used interchangeably, they're not always the same thing, because while drought requires rain and no one yet controls the weather, water shortages are something where human action or inaction, as the case may be, makes a difference. Right now, the basic problem in Australia across the board is that there's not enough available water, because rainfall is way down in one of the worst droughts in recent memory, and because dam-phobia has permeated almost every level of government, that because of that, no big new water storages have been built for years. Here's a set of statistics that are some of the most sobering you'll hear. Since 1990, there's been less than a 3% increase in large dam storage capacity in Australia, but in the same period, since 1990, our population has grown from 17 million to more than 25 million. That's almost a 50% increase in our population, but again, only a 3% increase in dam capacity. In September, the Australian Committee of Large Dams reported that the amount of water held in storage per head of population in Australia has fallen on average by about a quarter since the year 2000. In per megalitre terms, in 2000, the water held in storages averaged out to 4.26 megalitres per person. In 2019, today, it's now fallen by about 25% to 3.21 megalitres per person. And by 2030, it's predicted to fall even further, down to 2.72 megalitres per person. Now, that's a fall of well over 30%. And still, government says, let's keep up the migration levels. They can all just live in regional Australia. But without water, how can they? You see, it's not just a natural drought that's hurting us, it's the politics of water management that's making a bad situation worse. There are two basic issues. The first is the diversion of water from farms and towns to the environment. Now, I accept there has to be some flow left in these rivers in normal times, but these are not normal times. And if it's a choice between keeping water in a swamp and keeping water in a town supplying homes and businesses, I'd have to say I put the people first every time. Let's not forget that the current Murray-Darling Basin Plan was essentially designed to keep more water in the river, in other words, to take water off the farmer and communities that depend on river water for their livelihood, indeed for their existence. Then there's the second issue, namely the separation of water licences from the land that was supposed to be irrigated. Now again, I appreciate that water licences have only ended up in the hands of speculators and venture capitalists because the farmers who originally sold them owned them. Now, why they sold them? Could be debt, could be a business opportunity. But still, the question needs to be asked, as a matter of public policy, should water licences have ever been detached from the land they were supposed to irrigate in the first place? Again, not an easy egg to unscramble, but it's something that absolutely must be addressed if the next drought is not to have even worse consequences than the current one. One way or another, we now have a dreadful mess where the impact of bad seasons is being compounded by bad government policy. If the people contacting this program and my colleague Alan Jones are right, we have too much water going to some farmers and not enough to others. We have too many stretches of our land and riverbanks being kept artificially full and other stretches that are being kept artificially dry. Is it any wonder that farmers are now planning a Can the Plan convoy to Canberra on Monday to draw attention to their plight and to tell the government to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan that respects their rights and the contribution that food and fibre growers make to our country? To me, the heart of any new plan must be about more water storages, more dams. Regardless of climate change politics, we know that there always will be floods in this country, just as there'll always be droughts. And more of that floodwater needs to be retained in storages for use when times are tough. Any refusal to contemplate new dams, as we've seen here in Victoria, condemns Australia to permanent water shortages, given the massive allocations that have already been permanently set aside for so-called environmental flows. Now remember those statistics, a 50% increase in our population since 1990, yet only a 3% increase in the water we hold in storage. Our forefathers who set about building the infrastructure that's given us our unprecedented growth and prosperity, well, they'd be ashamed to see how little we build now, how little we plan for the future now, and how much time and effort we waste with the bickering and the blame game that goes on between state and federal governments. I have to say good luck to the Can the Plan convoy. For all of our sakes, I hope they really do shake things up.